Welcome back to WooEnglish, where we make learning English easy and fun with stories. If you like today's story, please like the video, leave a comment, and tell us what you think. It only takes a moment, but it really helps us. Your support means we can keep making great content for our English learning community. Now, let's start the story.
Chapter 1. The Spark of Curiosity. The town was quiet, the kind of quiet that settles at dusk in Pretoria, South Africa. But inside a modest home, the stillness was broken by a young boy's voice. "Elon!" his mother would call from another room, looking for her quiet, curious son. She'd find him in his favorite spot, curled up with a book, head bent low, eyes fixed on the page. He'd barely notice her, barely register her words even. To him, the world around had faded away, and the world inside the book had taken over. He was lost. And oh, how he loved to get lost. Encyclopedias, adventure novels, science fiction, worlds beyond Earth, heroes who defied gravity and logic. At just 8 years old, Elon Musk was captivated, fascinated. Questions poured through his mind like a waterfall, constant, endless, and relentless. Why are we here? What is the universe? Could we one day reach the stars? These questions, they wouldn't leave him. He would sit quietly, pondering, thinking. There was a fire inside, a restless feeling that nothing around him could quite satisfy. He would look up at the night sky, his gaze fixed on the stars. What's out there? What's beyond the darkness? But as he grew, this curiosity came at a price. He didn't quite fit in. He didn't blend easily. He was the quiet one, the one other kids didn't quite understand. While they played games or chased each other across the fields, he was somewhere else entirely. To others, he seemed strange, different. The bookworm, they'd say, the weird one. But to him, this was just who he was. It was hard, though, harder than he might admit, the loneliness, the feeling of being apart. Some days he'd walk into school, feeling their stares, and sometimes their laughter, words that cut, words that lingered. His heart would beat a little faster, his stomach sinking. But still, he kept his head down, kept walking. Even at home, things were complicated. His parents, Errol and May, both had high hopes for their son, but their lives were difficult too. His father, a hard man, demanding, believed in tough love, in the belief that hard work, above all, was the key to success. He didn't see things as Elon did. His world was practical, grounded. But Elon's mind was always elsewhere, and he learned to keep things inside, to stay quiet, to tuck his thoughts away, until he found computers. The day he discovered that old, chunky machine in a corner of his father's office, something changed. He was 10, barely tall enough to see the monitor, but as soon as he saw that screen, his mind began racing. He asked questions, so many questions, about how it worked. And for the first time, his curiosity led him not to books, but to build something himself. He taught himself to program. A 10-year-old, learning a new language, one written in lines of code instead of words on a page. Hours turned into days, and days into nights as he tinkered with the machine. His fingers tapping at the keyboard, his heart racing every time the code worked. And broke. Errors frustrated him, sure, but every failure only made him dig deeper. Try harder. For hours, he'd sit, eyes glued to the screen, solving problems he didn't even have the words to explain. And then, one day, success. He'd created his first program, a simple game. A little rocket flying through space, dodging obstacles. Simple, but it was his. He had made it. The thrill of that achievement filled him with a sense of power, of excitement. The kind that comes when, for the first time, you feel in control. From that moment, he was hooked. Hooked. He'd sit alone, thinking of new things to try, new ways to make the machine respond, new programs he wanted to create. At school, he could barely wait for the bell to ring. As soon as he got home, he'd run to the computer, diving right back into his world of code and circuits. His mother, May, watched him with a mixture of pride and a touch of worry. She saw his intensity, his focus, his drive. She worried that he was alone too much, that he might be missing out on the joys of childhood. But even as she worried, she knew Elon was different. He was driven by something that she couldn't quite put her finger on. Something bigger than himself. She knew this spark inside him was rare, precious, maybe even a little dangerous. As he grew older, this spark only grew stronger. His ideas became bolder, his questions bigger. He didn't just want to understand how things worked. He wanted to change things, improve them, make them better, faster, more powerful. His notebooks were filled with sketches, plans, inventions that made sense only to him. He'd sit, head down, pencil flying across the page, as if the ideas would escape if he didn't capture them quickly enough. And then, high school. A new environment, new people, but the same loneliness. He'd walk the halls, often in his own world. He was taller now, a bit more confident, but still the one who didn't quite belong. Still the one with his head full of questions others couldn't understand. There were teachers who saw his brilliance, who encouraged him, but even they struggled to keep up with his pace, his hunger for knowledge. "Why can't you just relax?" some of his classmates would ask. But Elon couldn't relax. He didn't want to. There was too much to learn, too much to explore. There were nights he'd stay up alone in his room, reading late into the night, eyes straining to see the tiny print in his books. Physics, engineering, space. He absorbed it all. And the more he learned, the more he knew. He wanted to create something meaningful, something that could change the world. As he reached his late teens, he began to think about where he wanted to go, what he wanted to do. South Africa felt too small. The world he saw in his books, in his dreams, it was out there, somewhere beyond these borders, somewhere far from Pretoria. And so he began to plan his escape. America, the land of opportunity. He'd read about it, studied it, dreamed about it. America was a place where the impossible could become real. And for a boy with a head full of big questions and big dreams, it seemed like the only place he could go. Elon Musk was ready to leave, ready to step beyond the pages of his books, beyond the limits of his town, ready to chase a world that matched his dreams. But as he left, that spark of curiosity, that fire, it stayed with him. It had only just begun. Chapter 2. Dreams Amongst the Stars. The nights in Pretoria were quiet, peaceful, and for Elon, they were magical. He'd slip out to the backyard when the house was silent, look up, and lose himself in the stars. That sky, vast, dark, and scattered with light. It pulled at something inside him, something deep, something even he didn't quite understand. It made him feel so small, yet so full of possibility. He'd stand there, hands in his pockets, eyes wide with wonder. So many stars, and so much space. How far do they go? He'd ask himself. What's out there? Those lights in the night sky weren't just stars to him. They were mysteries waiting to be solved, possibilities, a world beyond Earth waiting to be explored, the kind of world he dreamed about, and someday hoped to reach. But of course, no one else saw things this way. To others, space was empty, distant, unreachable. When he'd share his dreams, people would smile politely or laugh, thinking he was just a boy with wild ideas. "You'll grow out of it, Elon," they'd say. But he knew. He knew these weren't just dreams. They were goals. They were real to him. And every night, as he lay in bed, he'd close his eyes and imagine what it would be like to float among those stars, to travel to other planets, to see worlds no human had ever seen. His mind would race with ideas. Could we build ships to take us there? Could we make homes on other planets? These questions weren't just passing thoughts. They were puzzles he desperately wanted to solve. He'd picture himself, an astronaut in a sleek white suit, floating in the blackness of space. Or he'd imagine giant rockets launching, leaving Earth behind, soaring higher and higher. His heart would beat faster, his breath would catch, as if he were already there, already part of something much bigger than himself. The stars became more than lights in the sky. They were a calling. But this calling wasn't easy. His friends didn't understand it. His teachers didn't encourage it. They'd tell him to focus on practical things, on realistic goals. But realistic didn't appeal to him. He'd heard the word so many times, but to him it sounded hollow, limiting. Why dream small, he thought, when the universe was so big? And so he kept his dreams close, like a secret treasure. In his room, he'd gather books on astronomy, physics, space travel, whatever he could find. He'd read about scientists who dared to dream, like Carl Sagan, like Nikola Tesla. They weren't just people to him. They were heroes. These were the ones who dared to believe, who didn't let limits stop them. They had looked to the stars and imagined more, just like him. But it wasn't enough just to dream. Elon was restless, eager to make his mark, to prove that these weren't just childish fantasies. He knew, somehow, that he could help bring humanity closer to the stars. He began to see it as his purpose, a purpose no one else could see, but one that drove him, filled him with energy, with excitement, with determination. Yet he wasn't sure how to begin. Space was so far away. The technology, still developing. The people around him, skeptical, dismissive. But none of that changed his mind. None of it made him stop dreaming. Instead, it made him bolder. He would show them that space wasn't just for scientists in labs or astronauts on TV. It was for anyone brave enough to reach for it. And when he thought about it, about the future, he could almost see it. Humans, living on other planets. Kids growing up with 2 suns in the sky, running on red sands, living in homes made of Martian stone. He could see cities, under domes, stretching out into the distance, powered by sunlight, and growing food from alien soil. One day, he'd whisper to himself, one day, we'll get there. As the years passed, he held on to that vision, tighter than ever. While his classmates worried about grades, about sports, about fitting in, Elon was focused on something far bigger. At night, he'd sit by his window staring up, imagining rockets taking off, one after another, lifting humans into space, into the unknown. His heartbeat quickened at the thought, as if he could already hear the roar of the engines, feel the ground shake, see the earth shrinking beneath him. But how? How could he get there? He knew South Africa wasn't the place for space dreams. He'd heard of places where technology was advancing faster, where innovation was encouraged, where people with big ideas didn't feel out of place. America. The land of opportunity, they called it. It was far, and leaving would be hard. He'd have to say goodbye to his family, to his home. But it was necessary. He couldn't ignore the call of the stars. And so, with a heart full of hope and a mind bursting with dreams, he began planning his escape. It was thrilling, terrifying. He'd be alone, but he wasn't afraid. Not when he thought of what lay ahead. Not when he thought of the stars. Not when he thought of the chance, however slim, to make his vision a reality. On his last night in Pretoria, he stepped outside, looked up one final time, and let the stars fill his vision. They seemed closer somehow, more familiar, as if they were waiting, calling him, urging him on. And in that quiet moment, he promised himself one day he would answer that call. And so, with nothing but dreams in his heart and stars in his eyes, he left everything he knew, because he couldn't just stand by, couldn't just ignore the pull. He was meant to go further. Chapter 3. Challenges at Home and School. Elon Musk, a young boy with big dreams and an even bigger mind. But life was not always kind. Not at home, and definitely not at school. School was tough. Every morning he walked into those gates dreading what might come. Kids saw him as different, strange, the quiet one who preferred books over games, machines over friends. And kids can be cruel. They didn't understand him, so they pushed him away, made fun of him, left him to walk those hallways alone. And then there were the bullies. They'd wait for him, in corners, behind doors. Elon could feel their eyes on him as he walked by, hear their laughs, their whispers. He tried to ignore them, to keep his head down, his eyes on the floor. But sometimes they'd surround him. Sometimes they'd corner him, taunting him, calling him names. And sometimes they'd hurt him. Physically. Pushes, shoves, bruises that lasted longer than the laughter. It was painful, yes, but he'd learned to keep it inside, to hide the hurt behind a quiet face, to let the bruises fade. No one saw the pain he carried, not his teachers, not his classmates, and not his parents either. Home wasn't easy either. His parents, they were struggling too. His father, Errol, a man of strong opinions and strict rules, a man who believed in toughness, discipline. Errol wanted Elon to be strong, to push through, to succeed no matter what. But he showed it in ways that were difficult. Hard words, stern looks. Sometimes Elon felt like he couldn't do anything right, that he would never be strong enough, smart enough. He wanted his father's approval, yet it always felt just out of reach. And then came the separation. One day, Elon's parents sat him down, their faces serious, sad. They told him they were divorcing. The family was breaking apart and there was nothing he could do, nothing to fix it, nothing to make it better. It felt like the ground was shifting beneath him, like the only steady things in his life were crumbling. One part of his life was falling apart, and he had no control over it. After the divorce, life became even more complicated. He moved between his parents' homes, shuffling between two worlds. His mother, May, was warm, caring, and did her best to make him feel safe. But she was busy, working to support her children, trying to rebuild a life for them all. And his father, still strict, still distant. But Elon stayed with him, feeling like he had to prove himself somehow to win his father's approval. Yet, no matter how hard things got, he found his escape, his sanctuary. When he felt lost, he would reach for the books that lined his shelves, opening worlds far away from his own. Worlds where he could be a hero, where he could solve impossible problems, where the bruises and the fights and the loneliness all faded away. And then there was his computer. That old clunky machine became his companion, his project, his pride. He'd sit for hours, coding, creating, pushing himself to build things he could control. As the challenges around him grew, so did his determination. It was strange, really. The more people tried to knock him down, the harder he worked. The harder life pushed, the more he fought back. And every time he succeeded, every time he solved a problem or made something work, he felt powerful, resilient. But his days were still filled with silence. While other kids laughed and played, he was the boy who walked alone. Some teachers noticed his sharp mind, his quick answers, but even they didn't quite understand him. "Why don't you join the other kids?" they'd ask. But Elon didn't have an answer. He didn't know why. He just didn't fit. So he buried himself in his passions: science, technology, books. He'd come home, dive into his room, and lose himself. He started working on projects that even adults found impressive. Fixing old machines, learning how things worked, breaking them down, building them up. He wanted to understand everything, and as he worked, he dreamed. His dreams were his escape, his secret world where he was unstoppable. But it wasn't always enough. There were days when the weight was too much, when the loneliness was too sharp, the bruises too deep. Days he'd wonder why he didn't fit in, why he couldn't be like the other kids. Days he'd feel lost, small, like his dreams were just that. Dreams. He would feel the walls closing in, the doubts creeping up. But even in his darkest moments, he kept moving forward. Even when he felt broken, he kept going. And little by little, he began to see that maybe his challenges were shaping him, teaching him something. The hurt, the struggles, they were fueling him, teaching him to endure, to push, to stand strong, to find strength within himself. When he entered high school, things didn't get easier, but Elon had changed. The pain, the loneliness, they didn't go away, but he learned to carry them. They became part of him, part of his story, his strength. He learned to walk taller even if he walked alone. His classmates still didn't understand him, but now it didn't matter as much. He didn't need them to. He knew who he was becoming. "I'm not here to fit in," he told himself. "I'm here to go further." And so he kept going. Every struggle, every hardship, every bruise, and every lonely walk became fuel for his dreams. He began to see the world as a puzzle, one that he could solve. He began to believe that his challenges weren't holding him back. They were preparing him. Because deep down, he knew his story was just beginning. And no matter what the world threw at him, no matter how hard it tried to hold him down, he would rise, again and again. Chapter 4. Building his first computer. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind that traps you inside, leaves you restless, searching for something to do. But for 10-year-old Elon Musk, that day held something he'd never forget. That was the day he discovered the Commodore VIC-20 computer, a boxy beige machine that would change everything. Elon stared at it, eyes wide, his fingers itching to reach out, to press the keys. "What is this?" he whispered, half to himself. He didn't fully understand, but he felt something. A pull, an excitement he'd never felt before. This wasn't just a machine. It was a door. With no one to guide him, no instructions to follow, he decided to dive in. He clicked the power button and the screen came to life, a soft glow filling the room. He felt his heart race. The keys felt strange under his fingers, stiff and unfamiliar, but he didn't care. He was hooked. Hours turned into days. He was relentless, unstoppable, typing away, learning through trial and error. At first, it was a mystery. Words and symbols that made no sense, commands that seemed like magic. But he kept going, determined to unlock its secrets. When he hit a wall, he didn't give up. No matter how many mistakes he made, he kept pushing forward. Error. Again and again, red letters flashed on the screen, signaling failure. But instead of feeling defeated, he felt challenged. Every error was a puzzle, a test, and each time he cracked it, he felt a rush of excitement, of pride. He was solving problems, creating commands, learning a new language. And it wasn't just any language. It was a language he could use to build, to shape his ideas, to make something real. At night, he'd sit at his desk, eyes glued to the screen, fingers flying over the keys. His mind was racing, faster than ever before, filled with possibilities. What else could he do? What else could he create? One day, after weeks of practice, he had an idea. A game. A simple game with a little rocket that had to dodge obstacles, soaring through space. It sounded impossible. He'd never done anything like it before. But that was the point. He wanted to see if he could bring his idea to life, if he could turn code into something he could play. The hours disappeared as he typed, coded, recoded. Days turned into nights, and he didn't even notice. The outside world faded away. His fingers moved faster, his eyes locked on the screen, his mind focused only on that rocket, that space. He'd hit run, watch it work for a few seconds, then hit stop as soon as he saw something wrong. Adjust, test, repeat. And finally, it worked. The rocket moved. It dodged obstacles. It did exactly what he'd dreamed it would do. Elon leaned back, his eyes wide, a grin spreading across his face. He'd done it. He'd made something. And that feeling, that rush, was like nothing he'd ever known. It was like he'd just unlocked a new part of himself. But it wasn't just a game. It was a beginning, a spark that would only grow. He realized then and there that he could build anything he wanted. As long as he was willing to learn, willing to push through the mistakes, the possibilities were endless. The Commodore VIC-20 became his companion, his teacher, his test. While other kids played outside, he stayed inside, typing away, creating worlds of his own. People didn't understand. His friends couldn't see the appeal, and his parents, well, they didn't quite know what to make of it. "Why don't you take a break?" his mother would say. But he'd shake his head, barely glancing away from the screen. "Just a little longer," he'd whisper, as if the code itself were calling him back. He spent hours learning commands, understanding how each line of code fit together. He wanted to know every detail, every function. And with each program he wrote, each project he finished, he grew more confident. He began to feel powerful. Like he was in control, like he could take his ideas and make them real. But it wasn't just about the code. It was what the code represented. Freedom, control, the power to create. For a boy who'd felt so out of place, so misunderstood, programming became his refuge, his escape. The machine didn't judge him, didn't laugh at his dreams. It simply responded. To him, to his ideas, and with each passing day, he became more obsessed. He'd wake up, mind already buzzing with new ideas, new projects. He began sketching them out, filling notebooks with drawings, notes, equations. His room was scattered with his ideas, his visions of what he could build. The world around him felt small, but on that screen, he could go anywhere, do anything. This, he realized, is what I want to do. He wanted to create, to build, to push past limits. And it all started with that Commodore VIC-20, with that rainy afternoon, with that moment of discovery. He hadn't just found a machine. He'd found a path. And as he looked at his little game, the rocket soaring through space, he felt something he'd never felt before. A purpose. A sense that this was just the beginning of something big, something he would create. Because he wasn't just coding, he was dreaming up worlds he could build, ideas he could bring to life. And in that moment, he knew he would never stop. The journey had begun. Chapter 5. A genius moves to America. 17. The age of possibility, of dreams, and daring leaps. For Elon Musk, it was more than a leap. It was a journey away from everything familiar, from his family, his friends, his home. He was bound for a place he'd read about, a place he believed held the key to his future, America. The decision wasn't easy, but it was necessary. In his heart, he knew he needed something, more. South Africa felt too small, too limiting for the ideas bursting inside him. He had a vision for his life, a purpose he could barely explain but could feel with every part of his being. He wanted to create, to innovate, to push the boundaries of what was possible. And he believed, no, knew that America was where he could do it. With a few belongings, some money saved up, and a heart full of dreams, he set off. As the plane lifted from the ground, he felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. He was leaving everything he knew behind. He was alone. But that didn't matter, because he was also free. The land of opportunity. He'd heard those words his whole life, and now he was flying toward it. He imagined the sprawling cities, the bustling streets, the people with minds as restless as his own. And in his heart, he felt ready. But reality was different. He landed with little money, hardly enough to get by. He wasn't the son of a wealthy family or a famous name. He was just Elon, a young man thousands of miles from home with only his ambition to guide him. But he didn't let it scare him. In fact, it thrilled him. The challenge, the uncertainty, it was all part of the adventure. His first stop was Canada, a stepping stone, a place where he could start fresh, get a sense of the world outside South Africa. He'd spend his days working odd jobs, sometimes 2 or 3 at a time, mowing lawns, cleaning offices, doing anything to save up for the next step. It wasn't glamorous. There were days he felt exhausted, days he wondered if he'd made a mistake. But he'd look up, remember why he'd come, and keep going. And when he had enough saved, he took that next step, to the United States, finally. Arriving in America, he felt a thrill run through him. This was it, the place he dreamed of, the place he believed could unlock his potential. But still, he wasn't free of challenges. College awaited, and college was expensive. He enrolled at the University of Pennsylvania, studying physics and business. 2 subjects that could set him on the path he wanted, a path toward creating the future. Every day was a struggle. He worked tirelessly, balancing jobs with studies, doing whatever it took to stay on track. Sometimes he'd go without sleep, studying through the night, fueled by a mix of determination and pure stubbornness. He'd think about the sacrifices he'd made, the miles he'd traveled. He couldn't afford to fail. He wouldn't fail. He became known as the quiet, intense student, the one who always asked questions, who always looked like he was thinking 5 steps ahead. While others worried about grades, Elon worried about ideas, about solutions, about making something that would last. But it wasn't all work. During his time at the university, he met friends who shared his passions, who believed in his vision. People who saw something in him, something rare. They saw a young man driven not by money or fame, but by a genuine desire to change the world, and slowly his vision began to take shape. He started talking about technology, about the internet, about how these new tools could be used to connect people, to transform industries. He'd stay up late with his friends, scribbling ideas on napkins, sketching out plans. Some of his ideas seemed impossible, too ambitious, but to Elon, they felt within reach. The internet was growing, and Elon saw its potential in a way others didn't. He'd talk about it endlessly, describing how it could be used to solve real problems, to make life easier, faster, better. He wasn't content with just understanding it. He wanted to shape it. In those late-night conversations, he began to realize this was his moment. The reason he'd left home, traveled across continents, sacrificed sleep, comfort, everything. He wanted to make a difference, a real, lasting impact. And he was closer than he'd ever been. But he was still a young man, still figuring things out. There were so many paths he could take, so many choices before him. And each choice carried weight. If he was going to make an impact, he had to be smart, strategic, relentless. And so he kept learning, kept working, kept dreaming, because he knew deep down that this was only the beginning. He could feel it. The future he dreamed of, the world he wanted to create. It was out there, waiting. As he looked out over the city, lights stretching out in every direction, he whispered to himself, one day, they'll see what I can do. He had taken the leap. He had crossed the ocean, left everything he knew behind, and now, the real adventure was about to begin. Chapter 6. The Internet Boom and the Birth of Zip2. The 1990s. Silicon Valley. A time and place where dreams were no longer just ideas, they were businesses. And to Elon Musk, it was electric. The valley was buzzing with energy, the kind that filled the air and seemed to pulse through the streets. Technology was exploding. Startups were rising and falling like waves, and everyone, it seemed, was looking for the next big idea. Elon, eyes sharp and mind racing, could feel it, the pull, the challenge, the chance to make something that mattered. By now, Elon wasn't alone. His brother Kimball had joined him, and together they wanted to dive into this world, to create something that would change how people lived. They had an idea, one that felt big. Maps and directories, but online. It was called Zip2. It might sound simple today, but back then it was revolutionary. A single online place where people could find businesses, view maps, plan routes, all at the click of a button. And they believed in it, fiercely. The world wasn't quite ready for online maps or directories, but Elon was. And he was ready to show them why. But there was a problem. They had almost nothing. No big investors, no wealthy backers, no safety net. Just a tiny office, a few old computers, and their own determination. Elon and Kimball worked non-stop, coding day and night, building Zip2 from the ground up. They'd grab food when they could, sleep in the office, wake up and dive right back into the code. There were days they barely spoke a word, just the sound of keys clicking, the glow of screens in the early hours. Money was tight. Sometimes they didn't know if they'd even make it through the month. They scraped together funds from every source they could think of, maxing out credit cards, taking loans, anything to keep the lights on. Failure was not an option, not for Elon. The world may have seen Zip2 as just another website, just another .com experiment, but to him, it was everything. But the struggles were endless. There were days when the system crashed, when the code wouldn't work, when they couldn't find clients. Times when it seemed impossible, when giving up almost seemed logical. Yet, every time they hit a wall, Elon found a way through. Every setback, every frustration only made him push harder. To him, it was a puzzle, and he was determined to solve it. And then, finally, they got a break. Their hard work caught the attention of some early investors who saw promise in their idea, in these two brothers working around the clock. Zip2 was growing, taking on clients, building partnerships. Slowly but surely it was becoming something real. Real, but not easy. With new investors came new pressures, more demands, higher expectations. Everyone wanted results, and they wanted them fast. But Elon wanted perfection. They had clients now, real businesses counting on them, and every detail mattered. Elon became known for his relentless focus, his refusal to cut corners. He'd push his team to fix every error, to get every detail right. And while his drive sometimes seemed intense, it was that intensity that kept Zip2 moving forward. But with growth came tension. The investors wanted control. They believed in the company, yes, but they wanted things done their way. And Elon, he had his own vision, one he wasn't willing to compromise. Meetings grew heated. Tensions flared. It was a battle of wills, with Elon fighting to keep the company on the path he believed in. There were sleepless nights, debates that dragged into the early hours. Sometimes it felt like the pressure would swallow him whole. But he refused to give up control, refused to let anyone steer him off course. To him, Zip2 wasn't just a company. It was proof that his ideas, his dreams could be real, and he would do whatever it took to protect that. And then, Zip2 took off. Newspapers, big companies, they were starting to notice. This internet thing was gaining traction, and Zip2 was at the forefront, offering tools no one else had. Soon, the company's value shot up. People wanted to buy in, wanted a piece of this growing success, and for the first time, Elon and Kimball could see the future. But with success came a difficult choice. The investors, seeing Zip2's value, wanted to sell. It was an incredible offer, one that could set Elon up for life. But to let go of his first big creation, to hand over his dream to others, it felt like tearing a piece of himself away. He wrestled with the decision, back and forth, weighing the risks, the rewards, the possibilities. In the end, he made the choice that would change his life. He sold Zip2. The sale brought in millions, a success beyond what most people could ever dream of. But for Elon, it wasn't just about the money. It was about freedom. The freedom to create, to dream bigger, to take everything he'd learned and build something even more impactful. Looking back, Zip2 was the start. The company that taught him the thrill and the pain of building something from scratch. It was his first taste of what it meant to push boundaries, to work relentlessly, to stay up night after night chasing a vision. Zip2 had opened the doors to a world of possibility. A world where he could do more, be more, create more. And as he walked away from that chapter, he didn't feel loss. He felt ready. Chapter 7. The PayPal Revolution. Elon Musk had tasted success, but he wasn't satisfied. Not yet, not even close. He wanted to create something bigger, something bold, something that would change how the world worked. After selling Zip2, he had the resources, the drive, and an idea. The internet was still new, still growing, and Elon saw possibilities that others couldn't. Money, he thought. Transactions, banking. He could feel it. This was his next step. So, in 1999, he co-founded X.com. A single letter, simple, powerful, mysterious. But the idea behind it? Groundbreaking. An online platform where people could transfer money instantly, securely. No banks, no waiting, no middlemen. Just a few clicks, and money could travel across the world. To most, it seemed impossible. But Elon, he was ready to prove them wrong. From the very start, X.com was a storm of activity. Elon was relentless, pushing his team to innovate, to make it work, to build a system that could handle millions of users. There were endless meetings, late nights, debates over every tiny detail, and Elon, he was in the middle of it all, coding, strategizing, solving problems that no one had ever solved before. He didn't want to just keep up with the competition. He wanted to lead. But he wasn't the only one chasing this dream. Rival companies were popping up, each with their own ideas, their own teams, all racing to be the first to dominate online payments. The competition was fierce, intense. And then, PayPal appeared. A small startup with a similar vision and an equally determined team. The rivalry between X.com and PayPal became fierce, with both sides fighting for dominance, each trying to outdo the other. And the stakes, higher than ever. Investors watched closely, pressuring Elon and his team to deliver results, to prove that X.com could stand above the rest. There was no room for mistakes, no time to pause. Every decision, every move was a gamble, a step into the unknown. But Elon thrived on it. The stress, the pressure, it only made him push harder, and the platform grew, faster and faster, reaching more users, gaining traction. But as X.com rose, so did tensions within the company. Not everyone shared Elon's vision, his relentless drive. Disagreements turned into conflicts, arguments over strategy, over leadership, over who should take the reins. Some thought Elon's approach was too intense, too ambitious. The board wanted stability, caution, but Elon, he wanted to push forward, faster, bigger. And then, a decision was made. The board voted to remove him as CEO. It was a shock, a blow that would have crushed many. But Elon took it in stride, refusing to walk away, refusing to let this setback end his journey. He stayed with the company, still believing in the mission, still pushing his vision forward. And soon, the rival companies made a choice that would change everything. X.com and PayPal would merge. With the two companies united, they could focus on one goal: to create the world's first and biggest online payment platform. The new company took PayPal's name, a name that would soon become known around the world. The rivalry was gone, but the race wasn't over. Now they had to prove themselves to make PayPal the standard for online payments. The pace was dizzying. Security issues, user concerns, technical failures. Problems seemed to pop up daily, each one demanding a solution. And Elon, though no longer CEO, was still there, still pushing, still challenging his team to think bigger, to solve problems faster. His focus was on one thing: changing the world of finance. And then, it happened. PayPal took off. Users flocked to the platform, businesses adopted it, transactions skyrocketed. What started as a risky idea became a global phenomenon. People were sending money with just a few clicks, across countries, across continents. And Elon could see it. His vision was real. PayPal wasn't just a success, it was a revolution. But the journey wasn't over yet. In 2002, eBay, the online auction giant, noticed PayPal's success. They saw the potential, the power of an online payment system that worked so smoothly, so effectively, and they wanted it. They made an offer to buy PayPal, an offer that would set Elon up for life. It was a chance to cash in, to step back, to leave PayPal as a completed chapter in his story. And he accepted. The sale went through, and Elon walked away with a fortune. But it wasn't just money he'd gained. PayPal had given him something even more important: a name. He was now a pioneer, a visionary who'd helped change the way people thought about money, about business, about the internet itself. He had taken a risk, faced down rivals, fought through challenges, and he had won. Yet, as he looked at the success he'd created, he didn't feel content. He felt ready. Ready for the next challenge, the next dream. Because deep down, he knew that PayPal, as revolutionary as it was only the beginning. Elon Musk was just getting started. Chapter 8. Eyes on the Sky, Founding SpaceX. He had changed the way the world used money. But Elon Musk wasn't finished, not even close. After PayPal, he had the freedom, the resources, the chance to chase something bigger, something beyond anything he'd done before. And as he thought about the future, he realized his next move was clear. It was time to reach for the stars. Space had always fascinated him. The vast unknown, the distant planets, the mysteries waiting to be discovered. And Mars. Mars was his dream. He'd imagined humans living there, building a new world, pushing beyond the limits of Earth. But space travel was expensive, outrageously expensive. So much so that it was reserved for governments, for billionaires, for the elite. Elon wanted to change that. He wanted to make space travel affordable. It was a bold idea, an impossible idea, some said. But Elon had a vision, and in 2002, he took his first step toward making it real. He founded a company that would rewrite the rules of space exploration. a company that would do things differently, that would dare to believe in the impossible. He called it SpaceX. From the start, people doubted him. Friends, investors, experts, they warned him of the risks, of the cost, of the near certainty of failure. Rockets explode, Elon, they'd say. Space isn't for startups. They saw it as a game for giants like NASA, for seasoned scientists, for the untouchable. But Elon didn't care. He was willing to take those risks, to face those doubts. He believed in SpaceX with everything he had. He poured his own money into it, millions of dollars, a personal fortune. Others thought it was reckless, but to him, it was an investment in a dream that mattered. And so, he hired engineers, scientists, builders, the best he could find. But these weren't just employees. They were believers, people who shared his dream, people willing to work late into the night, fueled by the vision of what SpaceX could become. Their mission? To build a rocket, one that could launch into space and come back. A reusable rocket, something no one had done before. It sounded simple, but the task was monumental. Every piece, every detail had to be perfect. Failure was not an option, yet it was a constant threat. For months, the team worked tirelessly, testing, retesting, fixing every issue that arose. Each step was a battle against gravity, against nature, against the limits of technology. And then, in 2006, the Falcon 1 rocket was ready for its first launch. The entire team gathered, their eyes on the sky, their hearts racing with anticipation. Elon stood among them, quiet, hopeful. The countdown began. The engines ignited, the rocket lifted from the ground, and then, just seconds later, disaster struck. It exploded. In a flash, everything they'd worked for, everything they'd built, gone. Elon's heart sank, his dream shattered. But even as the smoke cleared, he knew. This wasn't the end. He rallied his team, encouraging them, pushing them to learn from every failure. Each launch was a chance to improve, to get one step closer. And so they tried again. The second launch failed, and then the third. Millions of dollars spent, years of work, and still no success. The doubts, the whispers, the criticisms, they were getting louder. People called him reckless, foolish, warned him to give up, but he wouldn't. He couldn't. He still believed. He knew that success was possible, that they were close. All he needed was one more chance. In 2008, that chance came. Falcon 1, launch number 4. Everything was riding on it. SpaceX was nearly out of money, and if this launch failed, it could mean the end. Elon watched as the rocket took off, holding his breath, his heart pounding. Up it went, higher and higher, every second feeling like an eternity. And then, it reached orbit. Success. After so many failures, so many setbacks, Falcon 1 had made it. SpaceX had launched its first rocket into space. Elon and his team erupted into cheers, their months of hard work finally rewarded. Against all odds, they had done it. SpaceX had proven itself, and that success was just the beginning. With the Falcon 1 success, new opportunities opened. NASA took notice, offering SpaceX a contract worth over $1 billion. Now, they weren't just a startup. They were a serious player in the space industry. Elon's dream was becoming a reality. And as the years passed, SpaceX continued to push forward, developing bigger rockets, taking on bolder missions. The ultimate goal? Mars. Elon wanted to make humanity a multi-planetary species, to create a future where humans could live beyond Earth. It was a dream so big that most people couldn't even comprehend it. But for Elon, it was real, and SpaceX would be the company to make it happen. They developed the Falcon 9, a rocket that could not only reach space, but could land safely back on Earth, ready to be used again. It was a breakthrough that revolutionized the industry, slashing the cost of space travel and making the impossible possible. And with every successful launch, with every return landing, Elon's vision grew closer. SpaceX was no longer just a company. It was a movement, a symbol of what was possible when one person dared to dream and refused to give up. And Elon Musk? He stood with his eyes fixed on the sky, on Mars, on a future he could almost touch. SpaceX was his answer to every doubt, every risk, every challenge. It was his way of reaching for the stars. The journey was far from over. But Elon Musk was ready for whatever came next. Chapter 9. Tesla, the Electric Dream. Elon Musk. He wasn't content with just one impossible dream. Mars was calling him, yes, but there was something else, another vision. This one, much closer to home. Right here, on Earth. Cars, the way people traveled, the machines that filled the streets, the exhaust clogging the air. Transportation was overdue for a change, a revolution. And Elon? He wanted to bring that change. An electric dream. A future where cars didn't rely on gasoline, where cities were cleaner, quieter, better. And so he joined Tesla, an ambitious electric car company that had big dreams and even bigger challenges. But Elon saw something there. A spark. Tesla wanted to build electric cars that weren't just practical but powerful, fast, sleek, the kind of cars people wanted to drive, not because they were electric but because they were extraordinary. And Elon was ready to take Tesla all the way. But the path was rocky. The first Tesla, the Roadster, was a gamble. It was fast, beautiful, an electric sports car that could rival traditional gas-powered engines. But building it? A different story. Each part, each detail had to be perfect, and the cost was enormous. Tesla was burning through cash at a dangerous pace. Investors were getting nervous. And Elon? He was pouring his own money into the project, everything he had, betting on a dream that others were ready to abandon. The pressure was crushing. They faced technical issues, delays, problems with suppliers. The Roadster kept falling behind schedule, and the funds were running low. People doubted, whispered that Tesla was doomed, that electric cars would never compete with gas-powered giants. Some advised Elon to back down, to cut his losses, to move on. But he wouldn't. He couldn't. To him, Tesla was more than a company. It was a mission, a promise to the future. A chance to prove that electric cars weren't just a dream, they were the answer. Finally, after years of struggle, the Roadster was ready. It hit the market, and people took notice. This wasn't a slow, clunky electric vehicle. It was fast, thrilling, a sports car that could go from 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds. It was a statement. Tesla was here, and it meant business. But one car wasn't enough. Elon wanted more. He wanted to create a car that everyone could drive, an electric vehicle for the masses. And so, they began work on the Model S. A sedan that was spacious, luxurious, with a range that shattered expectations. But once again, they faced setbacks. Production costs soared, deadlines slipped, and the company was on the edge. Again. Elon was relentless. He poured his energy into the project, working day and night, overseeing every detail, from the design to the battery technology. The financial strain was immense, and at times it felt like Tesla was about to collapse. They were bleeding money, and Elon had no choice but to make tough calls, even laying off staff, scaling back projects, doing everything possible to keep Tesla alive. But even in the darkest hours, he refused to give up. He believed in the electric dream, believed that Tesla could change the world. And eventually, they found a way. The Model S launched, and it was a game changer. A sleek, beautiful electric car that could go hundreds of miles on a single charge, packed with features, advanced technology, and a smooth, quiet ride. Critics raved, and the public? They were intrigued. Suddenly, Tesla was on the map, the name on everyone's lips. And Elon, he was proving that electric cars weren't just a fantasy, they were the future. With the success of the Model S, Tesla began to grow. The Model X, an electric SUV, followed, then the Model 3, the affordable sedan that Elon had dreamed of, a car that could bring electric driving to the masses. The orders poured in, the excitement grew, and Tesla was transforming from a risky venture into a force of innovation. But success wasn't simple. The demands on Tesla's production line were massive, and scaling up wasn't easy. Factories had to be built, processes perfected. And again, Elon was there at the heart of it, pushing his team, facing setbacks, overcoming obstacles. For him, Tesla wasn't just a car company. It was a revolution. And as Tesla's reputation grew, so did its impact. Other car companies took notice. They watched Tesla's success, saw the excitement, and realized they'd have to change too. The electric dream was spreading, and Elon's vision was leading the way. Cities, governments, entire industries were waking up to the possibility that electric cars weren't just the future. They were the present. Tesla had become a phenomenon, a symbol of change, of innovation, of daring to believe in a better world. And Elon? He was the driving force, the relentless energy pushing Tesla forward, transforming an impossible idea into a global movement. Yet, even with Tesla's success, Elon wasn't done. He knew the journey was far from over. The electric dream was alive, yes, but there were more cars to build, more challenges to face, more roads to travel. And as he looked toward the future, he knew this was only the beginning. Chapter 10. Dark days and moments of crisis. Success had come, but so had the struggles. And now, Elon Musk was facing the fight of his life. There were days that felt endless, nights where sleep was nothing more than a memory. He was running 2 companies, each with impossible goals, each demanding every ounce of his energy, his time, his spirit. But Elon had always believed that if he worked hard enough, pushed far enough, he could make it all happen. Until everything started to fall apart. It began with SpaceX. Their dream was to reach the stars, to make space travel accessible. But rockets are unforgiving. Every launch came with enormous risks, every failure a blow. And when their rockets exploded again and again, Elon felt the weight of every single failure. Millions of dollars vanished in seconds, turned to smoke and debris. The dream of affordable space travel seemed to slip further from reach. Then Tesla. The Model S had brought success, yes, but now came the hardest part, scaling up. Production lines faltered, costs surged, delays piled up. Tesla's finances were in freefall. They were losing money faster than they could make it, and Elon was facing the terrifying reality that his company, his electric dream, might not survive. Bankruptcy. The word hovered over him like a dark cloud. Some days it felt like every door was closing, like every path was blocked. Elon was stretched thin, exhausted, pushed to his limits. His fortune dwindled as he poured everything he had into keeping both companies afloat. If one fell, so might the other. Friends, colleagues, advisors, they told him to let go, to choose one, to save himself from the ruin he was hurtling toward. Elon, it's too much, they'd say. You have to pull back. But he couldn't. He wouldn't. Giving up was not an option. But the pressure, it was crushing. Then came the darkest moment. SpaceX was down to its last launch, their 4th attempt to reach orbit. If this one failed, the company would be over. Everything they'd built, every hope, every sacrifice would vanish. The tension was unbearable. Elon stood, eyes fixed on the sky, heart pounding as the rocket began its ascent. Seconds passed, then minutes. Higher and higher it climbed, and then it reached orbit. The rocket had made it. Against all odds, SpaceX had succeeded. Cheers erupted, a wave of relief washing over the team. For a moment, Elon felt the weight lift. They had done it. SpaceX had a future, but Tesla was still in crisis. With every dollar he had, he kept Tesla going, trying to keep the lights on, trying to push through the storm. He had invested everything, time, money, energy, into keeping it alive. He even borrowed money for personal expenses just to keep Tesla's doors open. Some days, it felt like he was standing on a ledge, one step from disaster. If the Model S launch didn't go as planned, Tesla would fall, and so would his dream. But somehow he pushed forward. Day by day, step by step, he kept fighting, refusing to let go, refusing to give in. And finally, with a little luck and sheer determination, Tesla started to pull through. The Model S was a success. Orders grew, excitement spread, and Tesla, for the first time, had a glimpse of stability. But the scars remained. Elon Musk had been to the edge of collapse, to the point where everything he'd built, everything he'd dreamed of, almost disappeared. And yet, he'd held on. Through the failures, the bankruptcies looming, the sleepless nights, he had found resilience, a strength he didn't know he had. Because in those darkest days, he'd learned something vital. Failure could strike, crises could come, but if he kept going, he could survive. The dream would survive. And so, he emerged from the darkness. Chapter 11. Pushing Boundaries, Solar City, Hyperloop, and the Boring Company. For Elon Musk, cars and rockets were just the beginning. The world was changing fast, but for Elon, it wasn't fast enough. He looked around and saw the problems: energy shortages, pollution, crowded streets. These weren't just challenges. To him, they were opportunities. And he had ideas, visions, solutions, even if they sounded impossible. The first step was Solar City. Elon wanted to bring solar power to everyone, to make it easy, accessible, affordable. He imagined a world where rooftops weren't just roofs. They were power plants, each one capturing energy from the sun, each one helping to reduce the planet's reliance on fossil fuels. Solar City was his answer. A company that would install solar panels on homes and businesses, helping people save money, helping the planet breathe a little easier. It was ambitious, but he believed in it. Solar energy wasn't just a dream, it was the future. The early years were hard. Solar energy was still expensive, complicated, misunderstood. Convincing people to make the switch wasn't easy. Some doubted, some laughed, some ignored him altogether. But Elon kept pushing. Solar City grew, installing panels on thousands of homes, proving that clean energy wasn't just for the wealthy, it was for everyone. But even that wasn't enough. Next came the Hyperloop. Traffic, pollution, commutes that seemed endless. Elon watched as cities became more and more crowded as roads became choked with cars. He wondered, what if there were a way to travel fast? Faster than planes, faster than trains, at near supersonic speeds. He pictured a tube, long and sleek, with passenger pods shooting through it, powered by magnets, gliding without friction. A network of tubes connecting cities, countries, transforming transportation as we know it. People were skeptical. They said it was science fiction, a fantasy, an impossible feat. But Elon believed. He released his design for the Hyperloop, inviting engineers, companies, inventors to take it on. It was his gift to the world, an idea that could change transportation forever. And then, there was the Boring Company. The streets were crowded. Traffic jams stretched for miles, wasting hours, burning fuel, frustrating millions. Elon's answer? Go underground. Tunnels, deep beneath the city, where cars could zip along at high speeds, avoiding traffic entirely. It sounded ridiculous to some, but Elon? He didn't care. He started the Boring Company, a project focused on digging tunnels in a new, faster, cheaper way. The name itself was a joke. He knew how boring tunnels sounded to people, but the vision? That was anything but boring. The Boring Company started digging. It was risky, experimental, unproven. But as they bored through the earth, as they created their first test tunnel, the vision came closer. Underground transportation that could change the way cities moved. A way to ease traffic, to reclaim time, to make cities more livable. Each project was a new frontier, each one a gamble, each one driven by Elon's vision of a better world. Solar City, Hyperloop, the Boring Company. These weren't just companies, they were statements. Statements that the world didn't have to stay the way it was, that we didn't have to accept the limits around us. Because for Elon Musk, limits were made to be broken. Chapter 12. Toward the Future, Mars, AI, and Beyond. Elon Musk stands on the edge of tomorrow, with a vision that's as boundless as the universe itself. For most, Earth is enough. But for Elon, it's just the beginning. He looks to the stars, to Mars, to the planets beyond, and asks, why not? Why shouldn't humanity expand beyond Earth, build a new world on Mars, become a species that isn't bound to one fragile planet? SpaceX is pushing toward that future, step by step. The Starship rocket, a vehicle powerful enough to carry humans to Mars, is being built, tested, improved. Elon dreams of cities on Mars bustling with life. It sounds impossible, like science fiction, but that doesn't stop him. He believes that humans belong among the stars, that our future depends on becoming a multiplanetary species, and he's willing to risk everything to make it real. But Mars isn't his only frontier. Artificial intelligence, the unknown, the unseen, the force that could shape or shake the world. Elon knows the potential, the power AI holds. He sees the risks, the possibilities, and he's determined to make sure AI isn't just powerful, but safe. He co-founded OpenAI, an organization focused on developing AI responsibly, ensuring that it helps humanity rather than harms it. To Elon, AI is a tool, a force that could unlock answers to problems we can't even imagine. Yet he's careful, cautious. He knows the stakes are high. In one hand, AI holds the power to cure disease, to solve complex global issues, and in the other, a potential threat that could spiral beyond our control. But Elon? He's never one to back down. He's taking on AI, guiding it, trying to steer it toward a future that benefits everyone. And then, there's Neuralink. For some, the idea of merging the human mind with technology is a step too far. But Elon envisions a world where our minds can connect directly with machines, where human intelligence is enhanced, expanded, limitless. Neuralink is his answer to that vision. Tiny brain implants that could one day help the blind see, the paralyzed walk, and perhaps even bridge human thought with artificial intelligence. It's bold, daring, like something from a sci-fi novel. But Elon believes. He sees a future where humanity isn't limited by biology, where technology opens doors to experiences and knowledge we've never imagined. And so, Elon Musk stands on the threshold of tomorrow, looking ahead with the same passion he had as a boy, gazing up at the stars. Each project, each dream, each daring plan brings humanity one step closer to a future that once seemed impossible. For Elon, the journey isn't over. It's only just beginning. Because for him, the future isn't something to wait for. It's something to create.